House of the Dragon has aired its first episode, and the reviews are positive. Still, it is a show in the Game of Thrones universe, so it's attracted a little bit of controversy already. One of the issues surrounding the show is Corlys Velaryon, played by Steve Toussaint. He's received a bunch of hate because of his race, and in this video, we're taking a look into the backlash and the reasons for it. In an interview with Radio Times, Toussaint opened up about how the discourse around his character affected him. The actor started by talking about the first reactions to his casting that he saw on the internet, specifically a social media post that compared him, a black man, to an illustration of Corlys from the books, who is white. That was just the beginning, of course. A lot of chatter surrounding the race swap of Corlys' character. Some think it's just inappropriate, while others are obviously taking it in a whole other direction. Toussaint is offended because no one ever complained about black criminals and pirates in Game of Thrones. But since Corlys is a wealthy man and sits on the small council, that's a problem. He said that he didn't want to make the story behind the success of House of the Dragon about himself, but he felt that it's important to acknowledge these things when they happen. In fact, beyond acknowledging them, he wants people to know that such a backlash can happen and minorities need to pursue their dreams in spite of those risks. He talked about how being part of the Game of Thrones franchise was a dream of his, though he failed to get cast in the 5th season of the show. He was hoping to nab a spot on The Long Night, but the show was canned altogether. But we'd say that things worked out for him. Corlys Velaryon is a legendary figure in George R.R. Martin's universe, and Toussaint definitely feels that he's glad to have missed the earlier opportunities so he could become the Sea Snake. In fact, Toussaint is about to get his own show at some point in the future. But do the haters have a leg to stand on at all? A lot of the outrage against Toussaint's casting comes from the fact that his character technically is white in the books. Corlys has never been a major character in the Song of Ice and Fire books, but G.R.R.M. has famously written reams and reams of history for his universe, and Corlys features in that history. House Velaryon hails from Old Valyria, though they migrated to Westeros before the Targaryens and well before the Doom. It's said that the appearance, which is now associated with the Targaryens, was a common look among the people of Valyria, and that's the main reason why Corlys being black is a problem. On top of that, Corlys is married to Rhaenys Targaryen. The argument here is that even if you could justify Corlys being black, it's hard to believe that a Targaryen would ever marry someone who doesn't look like them. After all, House Targaryen prizes their appearance and control over dragons to the point where they'd rather have incestuous marriages than risk their kids not looking Targaryen enough. We do see the children of Corlys and Rhaenys in the show, and they look like mixed race children. Finally, there's the argument that always comes up when a race swap happens. What's the point? Even if the show doesn't stand to lose anything by changing Corlys' race, what did it gain from doing so? We have an opinion about this, but we'll get into it a bit later. For now, what's the counter argument against the haters? Well, the one that should really put this entire debate to bed is that G.R.R.M. is heavily involved behind the scenes of House of the Dragon, more than he had been for Game of Thrones' second half. There's no way he would agree to cast Toussaint if he felt that it was inconsistent with the lore that he's worked so hard to believe. It's safe to say that little things like these all carry his seal of approval. But if you want to make this make sense within the lore of the universe, you can. The first thing you have to remember is that House Velaryon had been in Westeros for a long time before Aegon the Conqueror ever showed up. In fact, the Valyrian foothold on Westeros was key in the success of Aegon's conquest. Now, we know that generally black people exist in Westeros. Between the books and the show, we've seen plenty of them. It's easy to imagine that the Velaryons mingled with and integrated themselves into the social fabric of Westeros, and black children came up as a result of that. The Velaryons are still in the picture during the events of Game of Thrones, which shows how well they'd integrated into Westeros society, whereas the Targaryens only ever saw them as their subjects. As for why a Targaryen would ever choose to marry a black Velaryon, it's because the second part of that phrase is more important than the first. Targaryens don't necessarily prioritize Targaryen blood so much as they crave Valyrian blood. And at the end of the day, whether you're black or white or pink or blue, blood is blood. Also, remember how we said that the Velaryons helped Aegon conquer Westeros. The two houses have been staunch allies ever since the Doom and even before. A Targaryen would never hesitate to marry their child to a Velaryon, simply because the dragon and the seahorse are very old friends. But the backlash against Steve Toussaint's casting isn't about lore, is it? When it comes to anything, the majority has to squint a little to see things through the eyes of the minority. It's important to understand that what might seem meaningless to one person can be really meaningful to someone someone else. If for only that reason, a person should consider whether changing a character's race is really the end of the world or not. While the Song of Ice and Fire universe shares a lot of DNA with the real world, it's still a fantasy world. In this universe, we've seen dragons, we've seen a witch give birth to a shadow assassin, and there's even a boy who can traipse around the timeline at will. Why is it so easy to accept all this stuff, but it's harder to accept the existence of other races? We encourage everyone on all sides of this issue to judge Toussaint for his acting, not for the color of his skin. It's clear that the haters are in the minority, but their words hurt just the same. Westeros is full of terrible people. We should all aim to be better than them. In other news, HBO said the magic word to House of the Dragon, and it has set the ratings on fire. It's not like HBO ever struggles to get high ratings, but there were questions surrounding what kind of reception the audience would give to the successor of Game of Thrones. Those questions were answered with the thunder of a dragon's wings, as House of the Dragon ended up being the biggest premiere in HBO's history. The ratings have clocked in with around 10 million views. Forget premieres, that might be one of the highest ratings HBO has ever gotten on a single episode of their shows. As for HBO Max, the service crashed under the strain of people clamoring to see the show. They're definitely off to a great start. Up next, what could the success of the show mean for the Warner Bros. Discovery merger? The new head of the C-suite at Warner Bros. Discovery, David Zaslav, has notoriously been on a tear, jettisoning projects that were under development left and right. His most notorious move yet was to cancel the release of the Batgirl movie, cutting his losses on a $90 million investment. One of his planned moves is to merge HBO Max and Discovery Plus into a single streaming service under the Discovery name. House of the Dragon has a responsibility on its hands. Not only does it need to outperform Zaslav's expectations, it needs to prove to him that HBO is too big to be merged into Discovery Plus. If it can keep doing its opening night numbers though, HBO should be able to take it easy. Finally, where are we at with the Winds of Winter? Well, not only is George R.R. Martin not telling us, he also announced recently that he's done estimating release windows for his book. The sequel to A Dance with Dragons has been 10 years in the making, with the entire Game of Thrones show having started and finished in the time frame. The last major update we got on the book was that GRRM had blown through a few deadlines in 2015 and 2016. Since then, he's always said that the book was a few months to a year away. He was pretty confident that he might have the book out this year, but we got this news instead. And with his increasing involvement in HBO's shows, winter is looking ever further away. That's it for today's video. Have you seen the House of the Dragon premiere? If you have, share your thoughts in the comments section down below. And we'd also like to hear your opinion on the hate that Steve Toussaint has been receiving. But whatever you do, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.